there's a lot to rattle through with Tim Davie. Tim, let's start with the licence fee in principle and in practice. Richard Sharp said to the DCMS Select Committee before starting as chairman of the BBC that the licence fee was the least bad option, and John Whittingdale said the same on January the 19th of this year. Is that your view?
Yes.
Why?
Because I think these arguments are well worn, but if you believe in universal broadcasting, and the pressure is on us, and we'll talk about it, to deliver value for every household, there are genuine challenges in how you deliver that mechanic. Look across Europe, household charges, general taxation. The licence fee, for all its problems, and you'll get all the cliches from it, it's not perfect. There's loads of things we could debate about it, but it's enabled a few things. One is the BBC's been able to keep its mission, it's kept us independent, impartial, and it provides a certainty of funding in the medium term. So we'll no doubt talk about being in the joys of political influence, all of that, but actually, I'm sitting on secure funding to 27, 28 and can begin to plan. So the licence fee delivers a lot. It's not perfect, but it delivers stability. And the final thing, by the way, it's kind of worked in terms of what the UK creative industries are. And, public service broadcasting. I'll do it a few times, no doubt, in this chat, but one of the things I think we all need to do is get out and have a look at what's happening in media around the world.
Well, we're going to talk about that for sure. In the last charter, last but one charter negotiation, the BBC actually proposed, advocated a progressive household tax. And this is something that would have come from discussions that you were involved in. James Purnell wrote about it in the Sunday Times. James Purnell wrote that George Osborne vetoed that progressive household tax because he thought it would look like a poll tax. When you next enter negotiations with the government, will you again advocate a progressive household tax?
Not necessarily. I think we're a little bit more open-minded than that, he says. I think what we've done is said there's some very important principles. I'm not necessarily strapped to the detail of one funding mechanic. What I think is really important is, are we able to maintain a market-making intervention? Not a market. I went to a weird meeting with 100 director generals. I wouldn't recommend it, but and the one thing around the world is largely it's about market failure. It's about something on the side of the market. It's not what we've got here. We've got something that is incredibly precious, and it's driven the creative industries. It's critical to democracy.
Sure.
And but to your point. I am not at the point where I'm saying this is an alternative funding or this. I think the licence fee is there to beat, and I come back to the principles. By the way, we publish them for those who are into that kind of thing. And it is about, does it protect the mission? Independence critical, by the way, because there are loads of funding solutions you could get. But my view is if I can't, as editor-in-chief, act independently and impartially, then the BBC is over. Final thing is, I think you cannot separate funding model from editorial intent and delivery. Yeah? You can't say a subscription, but I've been very blunt about it. I could probably get a subscription where I live in Henley. We'd probably do pretty well. But I can tell you one thing, we'd start making the torture of my job and the joy of it, and I love it, is I'm trying to serve everyone. Right. And that is what we're trying to do.
The thing is the pressure, so I can understand why a progressive household tax would be quite a hard sell in the current economic environment. But the pressure on the licence fee is absolutely enormous. And you've described it as a universal fee a few times. The trouble is, as you know, and as you've spoken about a lot of times, young people aren't paying for it. So the latest figures from Ofcom have 1 in 7 young people in Britain, young people watch 1/7 of the amount of broadcast TV as the oldest. 1 in 5 16 to 34-year-olds watch no BBC content on any platform in a typical week. And the amount of time that 16 to 24-year-olds spend watching traditional TV has collapsed by 2/3 in just a decade. Now, when I put this to you or other BBC people, they say, oh, look at the audiences, the young audiences around the Queen. Not interested in young audiences, I'm interested in young...
Are you fencing off my answers before I've given them?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I'm interested in whether or not you have had any success at all in converting young audiences into young licence fee payers.
Well, most people don't pay a license. When you get to a student age, but they're not the main people. It is a household charge, Amal. Yeah. So the facts are, the license fee. There's no doubt there is some pressure. Talk to me about a legacy broadcast business. And you mentioned broadcast figures, by the way. The first figures I get in the morning are not broadcast anymore. They're online figures. Yeah. They're the number of people using our online. About 30 million plus a day. 71% of 16 to 34s use us in a week. We've
Are
got,
they paying for it? The question here really, so forgive me.
But hold on,
short time, the
let
question
me
is,
answer.
are you able to get young people to pay for the license fee in sufficient numbers that you can ward off the argument that the license fee is no longer universal?
I think there's no doubt that we can deliver the vast majority of households paying for a license fee because they get good value from it. And in most houses, what's young? What's young? I mean, I didn't pay a license fee till I was, went to university or whatever. I think we should not. We should be obsessed with usage and how that works, but actually, when you talk about the license fee, it's a household charge. Let me just give you a couple of bits of propaganda, if I may. We took
very quickly.
I'll be quick. We took more in license fee income last year than we did the year before, by £50 million. Yeah, we have an issue, which is more households now don't do live broadcast. We have to think about that but the idea that there's some kind of major short-term crisis is nonsense. We still get 88% of adults using the BBC every week. I am as paranoid as anyone, healthily paranoid, about the stats you've laid out. We're still the biggest platform for 60-34s in the UK in terms of time spent.
Okay, you got 3.8 billion from the license fee last year. That was 74% of BBC income. Do you forecast that in the years ahead, the proportion of the BBC's overall funding that comes from the license fee will fall and commercial revenues will grow?
Globally, without a doubt.
In, say, 3 years' time, what extent of the BBC's income do you expect to come commercially?
I don't know, but you're never going to, I want to make the defensive point, if I may, which is you're never going to be in a position where the commercial revenues in the UK offset a massive amount of the license fees. It's one of those classics. You wouldn't start here. It's quite freaky, but it allows you to spend against your objectives and your mission. The commercial arm, we've grown, and it hasn't been easy, from $1 billion revenue to 1.6 billion. I always used to say $2 billion, but that line doesn't work anymore. So it just sounded more kind of Austin Powers. But we're at 1.6 billion. We can grow that. I mean, it's a great story, but the EBITDA on the bottom, the profit on the back of that is a decent margin. It's ahead of our Ofcom targets. But if you make 300 million, 400, I mean, to subsidise and take over from the license fee, do the maths, as they say.
Okay.
It's just not gonna,
okay.
But don't misread that. I think we can be very ambitious about the commercial revenue. If you visit the Natural History Unit in Bristol, they're making for Apple. I mean, it's honestly joyous. We're making for Nat Geo, and the whole industry is thriving. The natural history, other companies there. I mean, people who know me know I am not interested in the BBC growing at the expense of the overall market. We don't need more share. We need to be relevant. And I don't need necessarily 17 hours time a week. I just need enough to justify £13 a month. You
said BBC 4, CBBC and Radio 4 Extra will close or go digital only at some point in life.
Not close. They'll go online.
Digital only, yeah.
Just a distribution choice.
And that's because of partly because of enormous pressure on budgets, also how people consume things. Are you currently looking at the potential closure of other services or channels as a response to the budgetary pressure you're on?
We're always looking at it.
What are you looking at now?
I'm not going to tell you.
Let's go through a few of the options. Let's go through a few of the options. I mean, Newsnight has a huge amount of world-class journalism. It's fantastic, even last night. Given the strain on finances in BBC News, is it value for money?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. The return on investment and proper current affairs is absolutely the heart of the BBC. So I'm not going to...
Is Newsnight value for money?
Overall, I think the Newsnight journalism is value for money, yeah.
Is the World Service, which relies partly on the licence fee, is that going to take a bad hit because of coming budget cuts?
Well, I think it's a service that's growing. It's outstanding value for money. I think there is a question, if I may, which is we currently spend, between 250-300 million pounds in the World Service of UK licence fees payers' money on language services. So I think that is a question of who funds that. I think that is a question with the FCDO, who currently put in money. That balance is something I do think we should be looking at over time in terms of how that funding works. For what it's worth, I think there's a huge opportunity to keep growing the World Service, by the way. It's just a question of who funds it. We're seeing growth around the world. The need for quality information is just overwhelming in terms of trusted news sources. But I think that there's no area of the BBC, and the BBC does kind of understandable trauma around this, which is, look, no legacy media operation. Look at anyone. They're going through enormous changes to reshape the business. And how do you migrate to a digital online future where a lot of your value, we deliver 85% of our value through broadcast. That is not a sustainable position in terms of the shape of, we will set out a bit more on this, which is the future of public service broadcasting and how it delivers. The World Services there's two questions. One is the scope of operations and how many distribution platforms, radio, online, television. And nowhere from the BBC is, and change is not just brought about by government. I mean, I would have liked inflation this year, and I think it was the wrong decision to put us flat for 2 years, just to be clear. I think the BBC should have had an inflation settlement. But those choices we're going to make are not solely about cuts, they're also about moving money around to where it's more effective.
Sounds like what you're saying is that the World Service is something you're having active discussions with government about the funding of?
Well, there's that, but we're also, and within our own budgets, what are we going to actually...
What are you going to prioritise?
What are we going to prioritise? Okay.
Isn't one of the trouble, you're talking understandably about the big picture of what's going on in the media industry, isn't one of the problems with this industry at the moment that the old business models throw off a lot of cash?
Yeah.
So they don't grow very much?
Perfectly put. So for a lot of businesses, it's not, linear channels. We had a very successful acquisition of UK TV, or bought the next 50%, one of the best deals I've ever done. The team have done brilliantly there. The economics are excellent. But the issue for all of us is how do you manage that transition without two things happening? One is you become too small. You lack scale and focus. And I've said this to death, which is the UK does obsess with itself a bit, but if you look at the behemoths and their capital, the access to capital they've got, we have to act. I mean, most of the discussion on the BBC, to be clear, it makes me smile when people say, oh, did the BBC get it, the enormity of change? Most of our discussion at the BBC board level is absolutely around what do we focus on, how do we ensure public service broadcasting has got a distinctive offer to hold up against what will be overwhelming forces. But the other thing is, how do you invest capital at such a level where you can succeed while navigating that change and keeping hold of your current businesses? We're all in it. The BBC is no different.
Especially if you don't have access to debt.
Well, no, hold on. We do have access to debt.
But not like Netflix or Spotify as well.
Well, no. But part of the license fee settlement, not talked about enough, was actually we radically increased the amount of debt we can take as studios, and how we use that capital, how we use it effectively and appropriately, by the way, because there's obviously all the fair trading concerns and everything, rightly. But in some ways, clever use of capital and how we do that is part of my job as well, to make sure we navigate the course. So at the end of the day, we remain strong with an online business.
Sorry to rattle you.
Keep going.
A lot we want to get through. Upon the death of Her Majesty the Queen, I know that you chaired a working group of senior executives who met, I think it was twice daily. And I spoke to someone who was in that group, and let me say, in the spirit of transparency, several people have said your leadership there was exceptional. But I want to get an insight as to what your priorities were in that group, and also how the public reaction to the BBC's coverage of Prince Philip and his death weighed on you after the Queen's death.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating, and there's broadly three things you've got to get right. One is you've got to get the announcement right. If you don't get that flawless, and this is all about and that really is about flawless rehearsal, just absolutely knowing that, okay, that's the special program. We switched over, I can't remember the 80 plus radio stations in the minute to the special program. So if you're in my job, there are some joys of my job, but one of the things is kind of don't screw that up is probably what you don't want to do. And the second thing is then, the second thing is what I call clutch control during an event like that. And then finally, it's just getting the final day and all the ceremonials right and beautiful. I think there was a couple of things. I mean, the clutch control was really interesting. It was definitely some of the learnings. You always learn from past events. I mean, never take off Gardener's World, by the way, ever. If you ever want to generate thousands, there were some bot-driven complaints, but one of my claims to fame is I did generate the most TV complaints in history in 24 hours. So you do learn. It's not that you're having a massive screw-up, you're just learning. But we had enormous conversations. We had enormous decisions to make. Do you put on Strictly? What do you do here? Do you do satire? Where do you start? So we were constantly on the clutch control, as I called it.
Is there anything you feel you might have gotten wrong last night at the Proms?
I think last night at Proms was the most finely balanced one. In the day, the Premier League had come off. We were a little bit worried about broadcast trucks, by the way, because they're just covering the events, because of course, with Scotland, Northern Ireland, we had an enormous amount of ceremonials to cover. So, yeah, I think that was a 50-50 call. I think we probably made the right decision, but you could debate it either way. We
just saw a film about it. Why have you made socio-economic background or class the focus of your work on diversity?
Because I believe that I absolutely believe that good intent is not enough to make decisions that are an output that is relevant to people. We're full of good intent. We're full of initiatives. We're full of people wanting to make it work. The only way I've seen it really work is when you change the nature of an organisation itself. You cannot just have good intent. So therefore, I have to set. I'm a big believer in targets. I don't think you should work at the BBC and earn decent money unless you're accountable, highly accountable. You've got tough targets. If you work at the BBC now and you're in the top 350, you have your 360. You get assessed. You're assessed. I can see who's delivering. And part of that is how, you can talk a good game on diversity and inclusion, but the truth is, what is your at the end of the day, what's your team like?
But you made class specifically, and we've talked about it, look, you made class specifically your focus. I think, I spent...
Well, I've made a number of dimensions of
sure.
which but we are one of the only organisations in the UK that has gone with a formally declared socio-economic diversity target, and that is simple because I think the worry, there is a worry in any organisation that groupthink is an issue. I also think it's unfair. It's just unfair. I just think people should have opportunity.
And you're going to publish that data. So
we
commissioned some, and it's fair to say that's ahead of other similar institutions. We commissioned some original research in BBC Current Affairs on accent bias, and we found that across the 4 main broadcasters in this country, so BBC, Sky, ITV, Channel 4, 70% of newsreaders spoke in the poshest accent after King's English, which is known as RP. And that compares with just 10% of the population. So 70% of newsreaders sound posh, 10% of the population do. Does that finding surprise you?
Not particularly.
Would you like to do something about it?
I have done something. I'm beginning to do something about it. Have you listened? I mean, what's interesting is,
Would you consider giving a main network presenting job to someone with a strong regional working class accent?
Of course, of course.
It's quite striking that it hasn't happened, has it?
Yeah.
You'd like to do something under your leadership about that?
No, but we're already, you begin to see more. There's a couple of things happening as well, isn't there? I've pushed 700 million in spending we're pushing across the UK out of the M25. It's changing the BBC. I had a meeting yesterday with a few presenters, and, new Radio 1 strand out of Salford, Morning Live coming out of Salford. You're just getting, it's going to happen. It's happening. And you know what? It's really hard when the first meetings are always difficult. But I tell you one thing, I am absolutely rabid on it. I think the more that the BBC, and the critical thing is you don't have a sniff of that slightly patronising London is where the best output comes from. It's nonsense. We are absolutely at a point where network output, world-class output, I'm not just talking drama, I'm talking across the board, comes from across the UK. And it's incredibly important. I think one of the most rewarding bits of my job is working with regional mayors like Andy Burnham or Andy Street working on the skills plan for these areas. I love that bit of the job. Absolutely adore it. I think it's very interesting what's happening in the regions. We've got more to do. The creative industries I could go on about, but you've probably got another 5 questions.
But with all due respect, your work.
Yeah.
How has Robbie Gibb improved the BBC's impartiality?
Because I think we've got he's one of a very high quality board, how
has he improved the BBC?
Yes, because like a number of people on that board, and I'm not genuinely saying, have we got diversity of view? Are we impartial? I think frankly, there's a lot of nonsense talked about this. As editor-in-chief, I've just hired Deborah Turness, who is outstanding in this. We are absolutely strong enough to deliver our output, be very clear about what we expect, and we expect, I put myself out on it, we absolutely are fighting for fair, balanced output with due impartiality. You should not know how Chris Mason votes or you vote. When you come to the BBC, you leave that at the door. Now, we do take board members with all kinds of backgrounds and whatever. Some of them have baggage, whatever, but they have views, and they're able to share those views. But they don't shape the output. They don't make the editorial calls. We do.
This is a talent business, as everyone in this room often bangs on about. You're not slightly concerned that so many presenters are leaving the BBC under your leadership? Vanessa Felt, Simon Mayo, Andrew Marr, Peter Crouch, Emily Maitlis, John Sopel, Dan Walker, Steve Wright, Paul O'Grady, Craig Charles, Graham Norton, Sean Keaveney, Sue Barker, Lewis Goodall, Gabriel Gatehouse, Jane Garvey, Fee Glover. That's more than a trickle, isn't it?
It's about 3% of our presenters left.
It's a lot of big names that a lot of people love.
Yeah, I agree, but I think part of what we do as the BBC is we grow. The number of meetings I've been in, or various committees where there's no competitive market in news, the BBC shouldn't be acting in this way. I regret actually the losses I most regret are often things like in our production teams.
Producers,
yeah. If you talk about, I won't name them, but there's a couple of young reporters come through who say, okay, I want to move up, but I need to do that, move. That is where I'm most focused, if I'm honest. It's not, I think we'll always have a bit of renewal. I mean, we didn't look like we had a weak squad in coverage of the
Queen.
The Queen. We have a very broad squad of people. There will be people moving in and out of the BBC. There always has been done to a degree. It's a hyper-competitive market. Also, as we've seen, I've been very clear about what working at the BBC means. It's values, impartiality, and it's not bigger than me, it's not bigger than anyone. We need to set a standard, and if people, it's not about criticism there's some brilliant journalists who would say, okay, great, I want to go and we've had a couple of people who said, I want to go and have my voice and share my views somewhere else, and no problem.
No, you're quite right. Producers are much more important than presenters. Can we all give Tim a massive round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you.